He prepared his cruel speech about her useless life, but was left speechless when 3 identical boys climbed into her private helicopter while she checked her Rolex that's worth more than his car. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The plastic stick trembled in Jasmine Williams' hands as 2 pink lines materialized with unmistakable clarity. She blinked, hoping the second line might disappear, but it only grew more defined against the white background. 21 years old, on full scholarship at Harvard, with exactly 2 semesters left until graduation, and pregnant. "This can't be happening," she whispered to the small bathroom mirror in her Roxbury apartment. The bathroom, like the rest of the place, was modest but meticulously clean, a stark contrast to the luxury condos in Back Bay where Jackson always suggested they should live. Jasmine splashed cold water on her face, trying to calm her racing heart. Jackson would be home in a few hours. They'd been together for 2 years now, ever since she'd been selected for the prestigious internship program at Reed Technologies, where the 25-year-old heir to the software empire had taken immediate interest in the brilliant engineering student. Her hand instinctively moved to her still flat stomach. How would he react? They'd talked about marriage someday, even children, but always in that distant, hypothetical future after she'd established her career and he'd expanded the company into Silicon Valley. The morning sickness that had plagued her for weeks suddenly made sense. She'd attributed it to stress from juggling her aerospace engineering coursework with her part-time research position. Now, clutching the positive test, reality crashed down with terrifying weight. 3 days and 2 more pregnancy tests later, Jasmine sat nervously in her obstetrician's waiting room. The clinic was in a neighborhood far from campus, where she was less likely to run into classmates or professors. Jasmine Williams? The nurse's voice startled her from her thoughts. The examination room was cold, the paper crinkling beneath her as she shifted uncomfortably on the table. Dr. Patel entered with a warm smile that did little to ease Jasmine's anxiety. 20 minutes and an ultrasound later, Jasmine stared at the monitor in disbelief. "Ms. Williams, I'm seeing 3 distinct gestational sacs," Dr. Patel said gently. "You're carrying triplets." The room seemed to spin. "Triplets?" Jasmine repeated numbly. That's not possible." Dr. Patel pointed to the screen. 1, 2, 3, each with their own heartbeat, approximately 8 weeks along. Jasmine left the clinic in a daze, the ultrasound images tucked into her backpack alongside differential equations and orbital mechanics homework. Triplets. The word echoed in her mind with each step toward the bus stop. Her scholarship covered tuition, but she survived on a tight budget supplemented by part-time work. How could she possibly manage 3 babies? Jackson, she reminded herself. Jackson would know what to do. His family was wealthy. They would figure this out together. By 7 that evening, Jasmine had transformed their small apartment. She'd spent her last $40 on ingredients for Jackson's favorite meal, filet mignon with truffle mashed potatoes and asparagus. The table was set with the mismatched plates they'd collected from thrift shops, but she'd arranged them artfully, adding candles and the single wine glass they owned. She would drink water, of course. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jackson. "Traffic's terrible. Be there in 20. Jasmine smoothed her dress, a simple blue cotton one that Jackson had once said brought out her eyes, and checked the food one last time. Everything was perfect. This wasn't how she'd planned to start a family, but they loved each other. They would make it work. At 7:32, she heard his key in the lock. Jackson Reed entered, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jawline sharp and distinguished, features that had made her heart race since their first meeting. "What's all this?" he asked, setting down his leather briefcase and surveying the candlelit table. "I made your favorite," Jasmine smiled, stepping forward to kiss him. "I wanted tonight to be special." Jackson loosened his tie, frowning slightly. You know I prefer eating at Sorellina on Thursdays. I've had a brutal day dealing with investors." His eyes narrowed as he took in her appearance. "Are you wearing makeup? What's the occasion?" Jasmine's carefully rehearsed speech evaporated. I have something important to tell you." They sat at the small table, Jackson immediately pouring himself a generous glass of the expensive Cabernet he'd brought home last weekend. The candles flickered between them as Jasmine pushed food around her plate. Appetite vanished. "Just say it, Jazz. You're acting strange." Jackson cut into his steak, frowning at its doneness. Jasmine took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." Jackson's fork clattered against the plate. "You're what?" "I'm pregnant," she repeated, her voice stronger. "Actually, we're having triplets." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Jackson's expression transformed from shock to something else, something cold that made Jasmine's skin crawl. "Pregnant," he finally said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You're sure they're mine?" The question hit her like a physical blow. "What? Of course they're yours. How could you even ask that?" Jackson pushed his plate away and stood abruptly, pacing the small living area. "This is insane. Triplets? Do you have any idea what this means?" Jasmine rose from her chair, trembling. "I know it's unexpected, but we can—" "This would ruin my life," he interrupted, running his hands through his perfectly cut hair. "I have the Silicon Valley offer next week. A family? Now? With you?" His laugh echoed against the apartment walls, hollow and cruel. "With me?" Jasmine repeated, her voice small. Jackson turned to face her, his handsome features twisted with contempt. "Jasmine, be realistic. You're smart enough for Harvard, but not for the real world. I need someone at my social level, not a scholarship girl from Roxbury with 3 babies hanging from her chest." Each word struck with precision, targeting insecurities she'd shared with him in moments of vulnerability. Tears welled in her eyes, but Jasmine refused to let them fall. "You don't mean that," she whispered. "You're just shocked. We can talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about." Jackson was already moving toward the bedroom, pulling his designer clothes from the closet. "This was never going to be permanent, Jasmine. You were fun, brilliant even. But marriage? Children? That was never on the table with someone like you." Jasmine followed him, watching in horror as he efficiently packed his belongings. "Someone like me? What does that even mean?" "Someone who doesn't understand my world. My parents expect me to marry Claire Winthrop or Abigail Harrington, someone who can host charity galas and navigate board meetings, not a girl who clips coupons and lives in Roxbury to save money." In less than an hour, Jackson had collected every trace of himself from the apartment. Jasmine followed him outside, oblivious to the fine rain soaking through her thin dress. On the wet sidewalk of Commonwealth Avenue, he turned to face her one last time. "Jackson, please," she begged, pride forgotten. "These are your children. Our children." His expression hardened as he reached into his pocket and pulled out the small promise ring he'd given her on their first anniversary. Without a word, he tossed it at her feet, where it landed in a puddle with a soft splash. "You're a burden to my future," he said coldly. "A nobody who would only hold me back in Silicon Valley. Go back to your place and don't contact me again. I'll never support children that would only give me expenses and no return." The rain intensified as his luxury car pulled away, leaving Jasmine standing alone on the sidewalk, the discarded ring glinting dully in the puddle by her feet. Only when his taillights disappeared around the corner did she allow herself to collapse onto the apartment steps, sobs racking her body. Inside, her apartment seemed smaller, emptier than before. Jasmine mechanically cleared the uneaten dinner, blew out the candles, and sat at her small desk. With tears blurring her vision, she pulled out a notepad and began calculating numbers. Rent, utilities, food, prenatal vitamins, and eventually, 3 of everything babies needed. Her bank account held exactly $243. Her scholarship covered tuition but not living expenses. Her part-time research position paid barely enough for rent. And now, triplets. Jasmine picked up her phone, fingers hovering over her parents' number. Both were public servants in Chicago, her father a transit worker and her mother a public school administrator. They'd been so proud when she'd earned the Harvard scholarship, the first in their family to attend an Ivy League university. They'd sacrifice everything to help her, she knew, but they were already struggling to make ends meet, with her younger sister starting community college next year. Abandoning Harvard wasn't an option. Her degree would be her only chance to provide a future for her children, their children, whether Jackson acknowledged them or not. Jasmine wiped her tears and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. At the top, she wrote "Plan" in bold letters. By dawn, she had mapped out every minute of the next 7 months until graduation. She would need 3 jobs, minimal sleep, and maximum efficiency. She would apply for every assistance program available, swallow her pride, and do whatever necessary to survive. Looking at her meticulous schedule, a different emotion began to replace the despair. Determination, hardening into something unbreakable. "He's wrong," she whispered to her still flat stomach. "About me, about us. And someday, we'll show him exactly how wrong he was." That cold winter night in Boston, as Jasmine cried alone in her chilled apartment, she couldn't possibly imagine that in 15 years she would grace the cover of Forbes as the woman who revolutionized the aerospace industry, while Jackson's empire crumbled under her indifferent gaze. The morning after her world shattered, Jasmine woke to the sound of rain still pattering against her window. For a blissful moment, consciousness hovered on the edge of memory, before reality crashed back with nauseating clarity. She was pregnant with triplets. Jackson had abandoned her, and she had exactly $243 to her name. She forced herself upright, ignoring the wave of morning sickness that immediately threatened to overwhelm her. There was no time for self-pity. Her meticulous schedule began today. By 4:30 that morning, Jasmine had already updated her resume and applied to 7 local jobs that wouldn't interfere with her class schedule. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep, but determination kept her fingers moving across the keyboard. 2 days later, she sat in the sterile waiting room of Boston Community Health Center, straightening her only blazer, a Navy second-hand purchase that had once fit perfectly but now felt uncomfortably tight across her abdomen. The receptionist position had been posted just yesterday, and Jasmine had arrived 30 minutes early for the interview. "Ms. Williams?" A middle-aged woman with kind eyes appeared in the doorway. "I'm Dr. Mercer. Thank you for coming in so promptly." The interview lasted exactly 12 minutes. By the time it concluded, Jasmine had secured her first job, receptionist at the clinic from 6 to 10 each morning before her first class at 11. "I should mention," Jasmine said hesitantly as she accepted the offer, "I'm pregnant. It won't affect my work, but I wanted to be transparent." Dr. Mercer's expression softened. "Congratulations. When are you due?" "June." Jasmine swallowed hard. "With triplets, actually." The doctor's eyebrows rose, but she nodded professionally. "Well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Can you start tomorrow?" 1 down, 2 to go. By the end of the week, Jasmine had secured all 3 jobs: morning receptionist at the clinic, afternoon library assistant at the university, and remote document transcriptionist for a legal firm from 9 at night until whenever she finished her assigned pages. Between shifts, she attended classes, maintaining the perfect GPA her scholarship required. Her new routine was brutal. Each night, she set her alarm for 4 in the morning. By 4:30, she was on the first bus to the clinic, arriving by 5:45 to start her shift at 6. She answered phones, filed insurance paperwork, and scheduled appointments until 10, ignoring the growing nausea that plagued her first trimester. At 10:15, she caught the bus to campus for her 11 o'clock orbital mechanics class, followed by advanced propulsion systems at 1. With 20 minutes between classes, she scarfed down the peanut butter sandwich she'd prepared the night before, often eating while reviewing notes or completing assignments. From 3 to 7 each afternoon, she worked at the university library, shelving books and assisting students. The library supervisor, a gray-haired woman named Mrs. Chen, noticed Jasmine's exhaustion during her second week. "You look dead on your feet, dear," she commented as Jasmine struggled to focus on the Dewey Decimal numbers. "Are you sleeping at all?" "I'm fine," Jasmine insisted, straightening her posture. "Just adjusting to a new schedule." By 8 each evening, Jasmine returned to her apartment, where she forced herself to eat something substantial before beginning her third job. The legal transcription work was mind-numbing, hours of typing medical reports and legal depositions, but she could do it from home, and the per-page rate added crucial dollars to her budget. Most nights, she worked until 2 in the morning before collapsing into bed for a precious 2 hours of sleep before starting again. Weekends offered little respite. She picked up extra transcription work and used Sundays to meal prep, do laundry, and complete coursework. At 11 weeks pregnant, Jasmine sat in the stark fluorescent lighting of the Department of Transitional Assistance office, clutching her paperwork with trembling hands. The waiting room was crowded with families, single mothers, elderly couples, all waiting for help with food assistance, housing vouchers, or medical coverage. "Number 47, called a bored-looking clerk. Jasmine approached the counter, her scholarship acceptance letter and proof of pregnancy clutched tightly in her hand. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, scanned her documentation with visible skepticism. "Harvard?" she said, looking up from the scholarship letter. "And you need food stamps?" Heat flooded Jasmine's face. "I'm pregnant with triplets," she explained quietly. "The father isn't involved and my scholarship only covers tuition." The woman's expression didn't change as she continued reviewing the paperwork. "You know these benefits are meant for people with long-term needs, not temporary student situations." "I understand," Jasmine replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "But I have no family support in Boston, and I need to complete my degree to support my children." After what felt like hours of scrutiny and invasive questions about her finances, relationships, and future plans, Jasmine left with provisional approval for food assistance and information about prenatal care coverage through the state's healthcare program. The small victory felt hollow as she rode the bus back to campus, keenly aware of how her life had changed in just 3 weeks. As her first trimester progressed, concealing her pregnancy became increasingly difficult. The morning sickness worsened, forcing her to make frequent bathroom trips during her clinic shifts and classes. Dark circles formed permanent shadows under her eyes, and her clothes grew tighter around her expanding waistline. In her 4th month, her advanced propulsion systems professor, Dr. Eleanor Chen, kept her after class. "Ms. Williams, your last assignment was excellent as always, but I've noticed you seem distracted lately. Is everything all right?" Jasmine had prepared for this question. "I'm fine, Professor. Just taking on some extra work to save for post-graduation." Dr. Chen, a renowned aerospace engineer who had pioneered several breakthrough propulsion technologies, studied her with shrewd eyes. "You're one of my most promising students, Jasmine. If you need any assistance, academic or otherwise, my door is always open." The kindness nearly broke Jasmine's carefully maintained composure. She nodded quickly and escaped before tears could fall. That night, as she worked on transcriptions past midnight, a sharp pain in her abdomen caused her to double over in her chair. The pain subsided after a few minutes but left her shaken. Dr. Patel had warned her that carrying triplets increased her risk of complications. She should be getting more rest, better nutrition, regular checkups, all things her punishing schedule made nearly impossible. "Just a few more months," she whispered to her growing belly, now visible beneath her oversized Harvard sweatshirt. "We can do this." By her 6th month of pregnancy, Jasmine could no longer hide her condition. Her once slender frame now supported a prominent belly that drew stares from classmates and patients at the clinic. Most were kind, offering congratulations or asking about her due date. Others whispered behind her back, the pregnant scholarship student, alone at 21, At the clinic, Dr. Mercer insisted on reducing her hours. "You're on your feet too much, Jasmine. I can't in good conscience let you work 4 hours straight anymore." The reduction in hours meant a reduction in pay, money Jasmine desperately needed, but her body was beginning to rebel against her relentless schedule. Her ankles swelled painfully by midday, and climbing the library stacks left her breathless and dizzy. One Thursday afternoon, while shelving books in the engineering section, the room began to spin around her. Jasmine grabbed the nearest shelf for support, but darkness encroached on her vision as her knees buckled. The last thing she remembered was the sound of books tumbling around her as she collapsed. She awoke to bright lights and the steady beep of monitors. A hospital room, and beside her bed, looking concerned, sat Dr. Eleanor Chen. "Welcome back," her professor said quietly. "You gave us quite a scare." Jasmine tried to sit up, panic rising. "What time is it? I have to get to my evening job." "It's just after 6, Dr. Chen said, gently pressing her back against the pillows. "And you're not going anywhere. The doctor says you're severely dehydrated and exhausted, and your blood pressure is dangerously high." "I can't afford to stay here," Jasmine protested weakly. "I have bills due next week." Dr. Chen's expression shifted from concern to determination. "Jasmine, I found your schedule in your backpack when I was looking for emergency contacts. 3 jobs while carrying triplets and maintaining a perfect GPA. It's a miracle you didn't collapse sooner." Tears of frustration welled in Jasmine's eyes. "I don't have a choice. No one else is going to take care of us." "Us? My babies and me." Jasmine placed a protective hand over her swollen abdomen. "Their father made it very clear he wants nothing to do with us." Dr. Chen was silent for a long moment, her intelligent eyes studying Jasmine thoughtfully. Then she reached for the backpack beside the bed and pulled out a familiar notebook, the one where Jasmine sketched her ideas for advanced propulsion systems. "I hope you don't mind," Dr. Chen said, opening the notebook. "While waiting for you to wake up, I glanced through this. These equations for ionic propulsion, they're revolutionary." Jasmine blinked in surprise. "It's just a theoretical project I've been working on between assignments." "Between assignments? 3 jobs? And growing 3 humans?" Dr. Chen shook her head in disbelief. "Jasmine, why aren't you applying this work to the MIT NASA competition? The deadline is next month." "I don't have time for competitions," Jasmine replied, gesturing weakly to the hospital monitors. "As you can see, I barely have time to stay conscious." Eleanor closed the notebook and fixed Jasmine with an intense gaze. "This work could change everything, for you and your children. The winner receives a fully funded doctoral position and a partnership opportunity with NASA." "It doesn't matter how good it is," Jasmine argued. "I can't possibly prepare a formal submission with everything else I'm juggling." Dr. Chen picked up Jasmine's meticulously detailed schedule from the bedside table. "What if I help you? I can assist with the technical formatting and presentation. All you need to do is refine your equations and the theoretical framework." "Why would you do that for me?" Jasmine asked suspiciously. "Because talent like yours comes along once in a generation," Eleanor replied simply. "And because 20 years ago I was you, young, brilliant, and alone with a baby. Someone helped me then. I'm paying it forward." 3 weeks later, from the same hospital bed where she'd been admitted for monitoring due to preeclampsia concerns, Jasmine submitted her final application to the MIT NASA Propulsion Innovation Competition. Dr. Chen had been true to her word, helping transform Jasmine's theoretical scribbles into a comprehensive proposal for a revolutionary ion propulsion system. The day after submission, as Jasmine watched rain streak down the hospital window, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Williams? This is Dr. Abrams from the MIT Aerospace Engineering Department. I'm calling about your competition submission." Jasmine's heart sank. It was too soon for results. They must have found a problem with her application. "Yes?" "I've been reviewing applications for 20 years, Dr. Abrams continued, "and I've never seen theoretical work of this caliber from someone still in undergraduate studies. We'd like to invite you for an interview next week, though I understand from Dr. Chen that you're currently hospitalized." "Yes, but—" Jasmine struggled to process his words. "An interview? Already?" "Ms. Williams, your work has already been fast-tracked by the committee. We can conduct the interview at the hospital if necessary." After ending the call, Jasmine stared out at the Boston skyline, lights glimmering against the darkening sky. Tears of relief and hope rolled down her cheeks. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to her belly, feeling the familiar flutter of tiny movements beneath her palm. "One day, that man will have to swallow every word he said about us, not for revenge, but because he was so deeply wrong, and when that day comes, we won't need a single thing from him." While she lay in that hospital bed, watching Boston's lights shine against the dark sky, Jasmine couldn't know that in 15 years she would be piloting her private jet to global meetings while Jackson Reed desperately sought investors to save his declining company. The steady beep of hospital monitors had become Jasmine's constant companion over the past 2 days. Dr. Eleanor Chen visited each afternoon, bringing fresh notebooks and academic journals to keep Jasmine's mind engaged while her body rebelled against her punishing schedule. Today, Eleanor arrived with something different, a tablet displaying the MIT NASA competition guidelines. "How are you feeling?" Eleanor asked, settling into the visitor's chair beside the bed. Jasmine shifted uncomfortably against the pillows, her swollen abdomen making any position difficult. "Better. The doctors say my blood pressure is stabilizing." "Good." Eleanor handed her the tablet. "Because we have work to do." Jasmine frowned at the screen. "I told you I don't have time for competitions. And I told you this could change everything." Eleanor's tone brooked no argument. "Your propulsion theory solves efficiency problems NASA engineers have struggled with for decades. This isn't just another student project, Jasmine. Even if that's true, look at me." Jasmine gestured to her hospital bed, the fetal monitors strapped across her belly. "I can barely stay vertical for more than an hour. The submission deadline is 3 weeks away, and I'll likely be on bed rest until then." Eleanor pulled Jasmine's notebook from her bag, flipping to the pages covered with intricate equations and sketches. "Most of the work is already done. You've been developing this theory for months between your jobs and classes. All that's missing is formal documentation and presentation, which takes weeks of focused work I don't have." "You have me." Eleanor's voice softened. 20 years ago, I was completing my dissertation while 7 months pregnant. My advisor, Dr. Margaret Landon, brought her laptop to the hospital every day when I was on bed rest with preeclampsia. She formatted my research while I dictated corrections. Without her, I wouldn't be where I am today. Jasmine studied the older woman's face, searching for ulterior motives and finding only genuine concern. "Why me? You must have dozens of brilliant students." "Brilliant, yes, but none with your particular combination of theoretical creativity and practical application." Eleanor leaned forward. "And none facing your particular challenges with such determination." A nurse entered to check Jasmine's vitals, interrupting their conversation. After confirming her blood pressure had improved slightly, the medical staff agreed she could sit up in a chair for short periods. "Perfect timing," Eleanor said once they were alone again. "Let's get started." Over the next week, a routine developed. Eleanor arrived each morning with her laptop and fresh tea, helping Jasmine settle into the chair by the window. While Jasmine dictated equations and theoretical principles, Eleanor formatted the submission document, asking clarifying questions and suggesting refinements. Hospital staff grew accustomed to the unusual scene, the renowned MIT professor and her pregnant student surrounded by scientific journals and complicated diagrams. Occasionally, curious nurses lingered to listen as Jasmine explained how her propulsion system could revolutionize space travel. "The ionization chamber configuration is the key," Jasmine explained one afternoon, sketching on a notepad balanced on her belly. "Current systems waste energy through heat dissipation. My design recaptures that energy through a secondary magnetic field." Eleanor typed rapidly, nodding. The efficiency increase must be substantial. Theoretical models suggest 43% improvement. Jasmine winced as one of the babies delivered a particularly strong kick, enough to make interplanetary missions significantly more viable. By the end of the second week, Jasmine was allowed to return home with strict instructions for bed rest. Eleanor arranged for a comfortable recliner to be delivered to Jasmine's apartment, creating a workstation where she could elevate her swollen feet while continuing their collaboration. "How will you test these theoretical principles?" Eleanor asked as they finalized the application. "The committee will want to see experimental validation." Jasmine reached for her older notebook, flipping to the back pages. "I've designed a scaled prototype that could be constructed for under $5,000. The materials are all commercially available." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "You've thought of everything." "I had to," Jasmine replied quietly. "When you have no safety net, you learn to anticipate every question." 3 days before the deadline, their submission was nearly complete. Eleanor stayed late, ordering takeout while they refined the final sections. As they ate Chinese food directly from containers, Jasmine noticed Eleanor studying her apartment, the carefully organized baby supplies collected from thrift stores, the meticulously planned meal preparation schedule pinned to the refrigerator. "You've managed all this alone," Eleanor observed. "It's remarkable." Jasmine set down her fork, suddenly overcome with emotion she'd held at bay for months. "I had no choice. When Jackson left, he said I was a burden to his future, that I'd never accomplish anything substantial, that these babies would only give him expenses and no return." "Return?" Eleanor's expression hardened. "Children aren't investments." To him, everything is transactional. Jasmine wiped away a stray tear. "The worst part is, I believed him for a moment, that I wasn't good enough, that I couldn't succeed without him." Eleanor reached across the table, covering Jasmine's hand with her own. "Success is the best revenge." "This isn't about revenge," Jasmine replied, resting her other hand on her belly. "It's about proving to myself, and eventually to them, that we never needed him." The day of submission arrived with unexpected complications. Jasmine woke to mild contractions. Not labor, the doctor assured her by phone, but concerning enough to warrant monitoring. Eleanor arrived to find Jasmine struggling to get dressed for the hospital. "The submission," Jasmine said anxiously. "It's due by midnight." "Already handled," Eleanor assured her, helping her into a comfortable dress. "I submitted it at 7 this morning. All we need to focus on now is keeping these 3 in place for a few more weeks." At Massachusetts General Hospital, Jasmine was once again hooked to monitors, medication administered to stop the premature contractions. By evening, the situation had stabilized. Eleanor remained at her side, grading papers while Jasmine dozed. The ringing of Eleanor's phone woke Jasmine from her light sleep. She watched through half-closed eyes as her professor answered, her expression shifting from professional politeness to surprise. "Yes, she's my student," Eleanor said, glancing at Jasmine. "I understand. Yes, we can arrange that." After ending the call, she turned to Jasmine with wide eyes. "That was Dr. Wilson from the competition committee." Jasmine struggled to sit up. "What's wrong? Did we miss something in the submission?" "Quite the opposite." Eleanor's face broke into a broad smile. "They've reviewed your proposal and want to fast-track it for consideration. They're sending representatives tomorrow for an interview." "Tomorrow?" Jasmine's heart raced. "Here? In the hospital?" "Apparently your theoretical approach to the ionization chamber is so innovative they don't want to wait for the normal review process." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Jasmine, this is unprecedented." The next morning, Jasmine convinced a sympathetic nurse to help her wash her hair in the sink and borrowed one of Eleanor's blouses to look more professional. By 11, she was sitting upright in bed, notes spread around her, when 2 NASA engineers and the MIT department chair entered her room. The interview lasted nearly 2 hours. Despite her physical discomfort, Jasmine answered each technical question with confidence, elaborating on her theoretical models and proposed testing protocols. The NASA representatives exchanged impressed glances as she detailed how her system could reduce mission costs by 30% while increasing payload capacity. "Ms. Williams," said Dr. Abrams, the department chair, "your approach to the magnetic recapture system is truly innovative. Have you considered the applications beyond propulsion?" "Absolutely," Jasmine replied, reaching for her notebook and flipping to a diagram. "The same principles could revolutionize energy storage systems for space stations and eventually planetary habitations. The technology scales efficiently." When the interview concluded, Dr. Ramesh from NASA lingered behind. "Your professor mentioned your unique circumstances," he said, gesturing vaguely toward her belly. "I want you to know that NASA has excellent family accommodation policies for researchers. Should your proposal be selected, arrangements could be made." Tears threatened at this unexpected kindness, but Jasmine maintained her composure. "Thank you. That means a great deal." After they departed, Eleanor returned with a small cupcake sporting a single candle. "A little celebration seems in order," she said, placing it on Jasmine's tray table. "We don't know if I've won anything yet," Jasmine protested. "Trust me," Eleanor replied with confidence. "I've never seen the committee respond like that. Something big is coming your way." The following 3 days passed in anxious waiting. Jasmine's medical condition stabilized enough for her to be discharged with strict home care instructions. Eleanor drove her back to the apartment and helped set up the recliner with everything she might need within reach. On the third morning, Jasmine's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Her hands trembled as she answered. "Ms. Williams? This is Dr. Abrams from MIT. I'm calling with news about your competition entry." Jasmine's throat tightened. "Yes? The committee has reached a unanimous decision ahead of schedule. Your proposal has been awarded first place. This includes a fully funded doctoral position and partnership opportunity with NASA's Propulsion Research Division." The room seemed to spin around her. "First place? Already? Your work represents the kind of breakthrough thinking we aim to foster. The full details will follow by email, but I wanted to personally inform you that your future at MIT is secured. Congratulations, Ms. Williams." After ending the call, Jasmine sat in stunned silence, hands resting on her swollen belly where her 3 babies shifted and kicked. Through the window of her small apartment, she could see the Boston skyline in the distance, buildings glinting in the morning sun. For the first time since the positive pregnancy test, she allowed herself to feel something beyond determination and survival. Hope. "You're hearing this, my children?" she whispered to her prominent belly. "One day, that man will swallow every word he said about us, not for revenge, but because he was deeply wrong. And when that day comes, we won't need absolutely anything from him." While signing the contract that would change her destiny, Jasmine couldn't imagine that her ion propulsion technology would one day put her name in history books, nor that 15 years later, Jackson would be the one helplessly watching the empire she built from nothing. The contract with MIT NASA lay signed on Jasmine's small kitchen table, representing not just financial security, but validation of her intellect and potential. For the first time in months, she allowed herself a genuine smile as she caressed her swollen belly. The babies seemed especially active tonight, as if celebrating this turning point in their collective destiny. "We're going to be okay," she whispered to them. "More than okay." 2 weeks later, that promise was put to the test. Jasmine woke at 3 in the morning to sharp, stabbing pains and dampness between her legs. Panic seized her as she fumbled for her phone in the darkness. 28 weeks. It was too early. "Eleanor?" she gasped when her professor answered. "I think I'm in labor. There's fluid." "Stay calm. I'm coming right now," Eleanor replied, fully alert despite the hour. "Call an ambulance immediately." The next hour passed in a blur of sirens, urgent medical voices, and searing pain. In the harsh fluorescent lighting of the emergency room, Jasmine caught fragments of concerned conversation among the medical team. Blood pressure 160/90. Fetal distress in baby B. Prep for emergency C-section. Eleanor appeared at her side, still wearing pajamas under her coat, her face etched with concern. "I'm here, Jasmine. You're not alone." Tears streamed down Jasmine's face as another contraction gripped her. "It's too early. They can't come yet. I'm not ready." A doctor in surgical scrubs approached, her expression grave but kind. "Ms. Williams, we need to deliver the babies now. The placenta is separating, and one of the triplets is showing signs of distress. We'll do everything possible for all of you." The operating room was a blur of bright lights and controlled urgency. Jasmine lay awake but numb from the chest down as the surgical team worked with practiced efficiency. Eleanor remained by her head, squeezing her hand and murmuring reassurances. "First baby coming," announced the surgeon. Moments later, a tiny, mewling cry pierced the air, so small, so fragile, yet undeniably alive. "It's a boy," someone said, briefly showing Jasmine a glimpse of a minuscule red face before whisking him away to waiting NICU staff. The second and third deliveries followed in quick succession. Alexander, Nathan, and William, the names she'd chosen weeks ago, were all breathing, all fighting, despite being born 2 months premature. Each weighed less than 3 pounds, their translucent skin revealing delicate networks of veins, their tiny fingers no larger than grains of rice. After the surgery, Jasmine was wheeled to recovery while her sons were taken to the neonatal intensive care unit. Hours later, still groggy from medication, she was transported in a wheelchair to see them for the first time. The NICU was a different world. Hushed voices, gentle beeping of monitors, and the sterile smell of medical equipment. 3 incubators stood side by side, each containing a tiny form connected to tubes and monitors. Jasmine pressed her hand against the clear plastic, tears flowing freely as she took in their fragile beauty. "They're fighters," said the NICU nurse. "All 3 are breathing on their own with just a little oxygen support. That's remarkable for 28 weekers." "Can I touch them?" Jasmine asked, her voice barely audible. "Of course. Open the side port here, and you can put your hand in." Jasmine reached through the circular opening of the first incubator, gently placing her finger in Alexander's tiny palm. His fingers reflexively curled around hers, so small yet gripping with surprising strength. "Hello, Alexander," she whispered. "I'm your mom." She moved to the next incubator, repeating the process with Nathan, then William. "You 3 are my family now. We're going to be extraordinary together." The next weeks passed in a haze of hospital visits, breast pump schedules, and stolen moments of sleep. Jasmine recovered from her surgery while dividing her time between graduate school preparations and the NICU. Eleanor proved invaluable, arranging for Jasmine's classes to begin with remote options and helping secure an apartment closer to MIT and the hospital. 6 weeks after their birth, Alexander was the first to leave the hospital, followed 2 days later by his brothers. Jasmine stood in the doorway of her new apartment, a small 2-bedroom unit in Cambridge that Eleanor had helped find through university housing, watching as the NICU nurse gave final instructions for home care. 3 second-hand cribs, donated by a university faculty support program, filled the small second bedroom. Between them stood a changing table rescued from a thrift store and meticulously sanitized. Jasmine had arranged everything with mathematical precision, maximizing the limited space. That first night alone with the triplets tested every ounce of Jasmine's resolve. As soon as one baby settled, another would wake hungry or needing a change. By morning, she had slept less than an hour. Her surgical scar ached fiercely, and tears of exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. "We can do this," she whispered to herself, rocking Nathan while Alexander slept in a sling across her chest and William fussed in his crib. "We have to." Eleanor arrived at 9, taking in Jasmine's exhausted appearance with concern. "You can't do this alone every night, not while healing and starting doctoral studies." "I don't have a choice," Jasmine replied, voice cracking with fatigue. "Yes, you do." Eleanor set down her bag and took William from his crib. "I've arranged for a rotation of graduate assistants from the department to help during nights. 4 hours each, 3 nights a week. all vetted, all volunteers. "I can't accept charity. It's not charity, it's community," Eleanor interrupted firmly. "And it's temporary, just until you establish a routine and recover fully. Academia should support its own, especially its most promising members." With this support system in place, Jasmine established a grueling but manageable schedule. Her days began at 5 with feeding and changing all 3 infants. By 7, the morning assistant would arrive, allowing Jasmine to shower and prepare for classes. She attended lectures with a breast pump in her bag, using breaks to express milk and store it carefully labeled for each baby's specific needs. Evenings were reserved exclusively for the triplets, bath time, feeding, and precious moments of connection as she read aloud from her textbooks, the complex language of aerospace engineering becoming their lullabies. After they slept, she would study until her eyes burned, often waking moments before their midnight feeding as if her body had synchronized to their needs. On weekends and during late nights in the MIT laboratory, the triplets became a familiar sight to faculty and graduate students. Jasmine arranged 3 carriers, 1 strapped to her chest, and 2 flanking her sides in specially modified strollers, allowing her to move through the campus with all 3 babies. "You're raising the next generation of aerospace engineers," joked Dr. Abrams when he encountered her in the lab one Saturday, all 3 infants sleeping peacefully while she worked on her prototype. "At minimum," Jasmine replied with a tired smile. The NASA representatives were equally accommodating during her initial project reviews. During one presentation, William began crying inconsolably. Without missing a beat, Jasmine lifted him to her shoulder, patting his back while continuing her explanation of magnetic field configurations with her free hand. "Impressive multitasking," noted Dr. Ramesh afterward. "Most doctoral candidates struggle to present and breathe simultaneously." "Necessity breeds adaptation," Jasmine replied simply. As the months passed, Jasmine's propulsion system prototype began taking shape. The initial test results exceeded even her theoretical predictions, generating excitement among her NASA collaborators. Simultaneously, the triplets grew from fragile preemies to robust, alert infants, each developing distinct personalities that amazed Jasmine daily. Alexander, the firstborn, watched everything with intense focus, his eyes tracking movement with unusual precision for an infant. Nathan responded dramatically to sounds, especially Jasmine's voice when she explained complex equations aloud. William seemed perpetually in motion, his tiny hands constantly reaching and exploring. When the boys reached 6 months, 4 months corrected age, Jasmine received her first significant research stipend from NASA. That evening, Eleanor helped her celebrate with a small cake in the laboratory while the triplets watched from their carriers, wide-eyed at the tiny flame. "To the beginning of your empire," Eleanor toasted with apple juice in a paper cup. "Not an empire," Jasmine corrected. "A legacy of innovation, something meaningful for my sons." Later that night, after finally getting all 3 babies to sleep simultaneously, a rare miracle, Jasmine collapsed onto her small sofa, surrounded by research papers, baby bottles, and the prototype calculations she'd been refining. Within moments, exhaustion claimed her. Eleanor arrived the next morning to find Jasmine still asleep on the sofa, an open textbook on her chest, formula stains on her MIT sweatshirt, and 3 babies miraculously still sleeping in their cribs. Quietly, she took out her phone and captured the image, the brilliant young scientist surrounded by both her academic work and evidence of motherhood. The photograph would remain on Eleanor's desk for years to come, a reminder of extraordinary determination in the face of seemingly impossible circumstances. As the triplets approached their first birthday, Jasmine's life had settled into an exhausting but productive rhythm. Her research was advancing rapidly, attracting attention throughout the aerospace industry. The prototype had successfully demonstrated a 40% efficiency improvement over existing systems, validating her theoretical models and securing continued funding. The boys' first birthday celebration took place in the MIT laboratory, surrounded by scientists and engineers who had become their extended family. A small cake decorated with rocket ships sat on a cleared workbench, while Alexander, Nathan, and William, now robust one-year-olds with matching dark curls, observed the proceedings from their customized playpen in the corner. "To think," whispered Dr. Abrams to Eleanor as they watched Jasmine helping the triplets blow out a single candle. "1 year ago, she was a struggling undergraduate. Now she's revolutionizing propulsion technology while raising 3 exceptional boys." "Some people rise to challenges," Eleanor replied. "Others transcend them entirely." As she watched her sons giggling and smearing cake on their faces, Jasmine felt a moment of perfect clarity. The path ahead would remain difficult, but they would walk it together. Her small, extraordinary family that had been forged in adversity but would not be defined by it. While observing her children finally sleeping after an exhausting night, Jasmine didn't imagine that 10 years later she would be piloting her private jet to global meetings, while Jackson Reed desperately sought investors to save his declining company. The spring sunshine streamed through the windows of MIT's auditorium as Jasmine adjusted her doctoral cap, the weight unfamiliar but welcome. 3 years of relentless work had culminated in this moment. In the audience, Eleanor sat with 3 squirming 3-year-old boys, each dressed in identical navy suits that Eleanor had insisted on purchasing for the occasion. "Dr. Jasmine Williams," announced the university president, his voice carrying across the hushed auditorium. As Jasmine crossed the stage to receive her diploma, a chorus of enthusiastic clapping erupted from the front row. Alexander, Nathan, and William stood on their chairs, applauding with uncoordinated but passionate fervor, their small faces beaming with pride they couldn't fully comprehend but felt deeply nonetheless. "That's Mama!" William shouted, his voice carrying through the formal ceremony and eliciting chuckles from the audience. Jasmine accepted her diploma with steady hands, so different from the trembling fingers that had held a positive pregnancy test just 4 years ago. Her dissertation on revolutionary ion propulsion systems had not merely satisfied academic requirements. It had caught the attention of aerospace companies worldwide. The reception following the ceremony buzzed with congratulations and, more significantly, job offers. Representatives from Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and 3 international aerospace corporations circled Jasmine like satellites in precise orbit, each attempting to pull her into their gravitational field with promises of substantial salaries and research opportunities. "We can offer immediate relocation to our Seattle campus," said the Boeing executive, eyeing the triplets who were currently dismantling the dessert table with methodical precision. "Of course, we have excellent childcare facilities on site." "Lockheed's family leave policies are unmatched in the industry," countered their representative. "And our Maryland Research Center is expanding specifically in propulsion technologies." Jasmine listened politely, accepting business cards while keeping one eye on her sons. Alexander had constructed an impressive tower from dessert plates, while Nathan examined the structural integrity with serious focus. William, ever the risk-taker, was attempting to climb a decorative column. "Thank you for your interest," she replied to each offer with professional courtesy. "I'll need time to consider all options." Later that evening, after tucking the exhausted boys into bed, Jasmine spread the collection of business cards across her small kitchen table where Eleanor had joined her for a celebratory glass of wine. "Impressive offers," Eleanor noted, examining the salary figures. "The Lockheed position would set you up comfortably." Jasmine traced the edge of a business card, her expression contemplative. "They're all essentially the same offer with different packaging." "Different cities, different research focuses," Eleanor pointed out. "Different cages," Jasmine corrected softly. "They all want my mind, but not my family. Did you notice how they spoke about my children? We have childcare facilities, as if I want my boys warehoused while I work 70-hour weeks implementing someone else's vision." Eleanor studied her former student, now colleague. "What are you considering instead?" Jasmine pulled a notebook from her bag, not her technical journal, but the one where she sketched broader dreams. My propulsion system design is mine. The patents are in my name, with licensing rights negotiable. What if, instead of joining an existing structure, I build something new? You want to start your own company? Eleanor's eyebrows rose. With 3 3-year-olds and limited capital? With 3 brilliant children who deserve to see their mother build something meaningful. Jasmine flipped through pages of careful notes and preliminary business plans. The MIT Innovation Grant gives me 6 months of runway. I've calculated minimum viable expenses and mapped potential angel investors specifically interested in aerospace innovation. Eleanor's expression softened with concern. The corporate path offers security, Jasmine, health insurance, retirement benefits, regular hours. Security bought with autonomy, Jasmine replied. The moment any project becomes inconvenient for corporate priorities, it's shelved. My work is too important for that fate. The following week, Jasmine declined all corporate offers, shocking the aerospace industry's recruiting circles. Instead, she secured a small laboratory space in Cambridge through MIT's Startup Incubator program. The space came with basic equipment access and, crucially, a small adjoining room that she immediately converted into a play space for the triplets. The makeshift laboratory became their second home. While most new companies boasted sleek offices and impressive technology, Jasmine's operation began with second-hand equipment, carefully calibrated by her own hands, and a corner designated for 3 curious toddlers who absorbed the environment like sponges. Ionization parameters stable, Jasmine muttered, adjusting settings on her prototype while keeping one eye on the play space where Alexander constructed complex structures from wooden blocks. Stable, echoed Nathan from his spot at the small desk where he banged enthusiastically on an old keyboard Jasmine had disconnected for his amusement. William, always in motion, zoomed around the laboratory perimeter with a toy rocket, making impressively accurate engine sounds for a 3-year-old. Plasma injection sequence initiated, he announced, repeating phrases he'd heard countless times. Jasmine smiled, despite her exhaustion. Her sons were developing extraordinary vocabularies, their minds absorbing the scientific language that surrounded them as naturally as other children learned about farms or dinosaurs. The first months of entrepreneurship tested Jasmine's resolve daily. While her technical expertise was unquestionable, the business world regarded her with skepticism bordering on condescension. Potential investors would arrive at the laboratory, their expressions shifting from interest to doubt upon seeing the playpen in the corner and 3 identical boys watching them with intelligent curiosity. "Your technology is fascinating, Dr. Williams," said one venture capitalist after her presentation, "but your situation raises concerns about dedication and focus." "My situation?" Jasmine raised an eyebrow. The investor gestured vaguely toward the triplets, who were currently engaged in a surprisingly sophisticated debate about whether rockets could go underwater. A single mother with 3 young children represents significant risk factors. How can you devote the necessary 100-hour weeks this venture would require? "I completed my doctorate while raising triplets alone," Jasmine replied evenly. "I've published 6 papers and secured 3 patents during their nap times. With respect, my efficiency likely exceeds that of founders who require sleep or social lives." Despite her confidence in presentations, rejection followed rejection. After particularly difficult meetings, when the laboratory emptied of dismissive investors, Jasmine would sit on the floor with her sons, building block towers and finding renewed purpose in their unconditional admiration. "Mama makes rockets fly faster," Alexander would state with absolute certainty. "To the stars," William would add, launching himself into her arms. These moments sustained her through months of working late into the night after putting the boys to bed, perfecting prototypes and revising business proposals until her eyes burned with fatigue. 6 months into her venture, with funds dwindling dangerously, Jasmine prepared for a presentation to Stellar X, a small but innovative company specializing in microsatellite deployment. This potential contract represented her most promising opportunity yet. and perhaps her last chance before financial reality forced her back to corporate employment. The morning of the presentation, disaster struck. The triplets' daycare called with news of a stomach virus outbreak. All 3 boys were showing symptoms and needed immediate pickup. With the Stellar X executives scheduled to arrive in 3 hours, Jasmine faced an impossible choice. She arrived at the daycare to find 3 miserable toddlers, pale and exhausted. "I'm so sorry, my brave boys," she murmured, gathering their feverish bodies close. "We're going to manage this together." At the laboratory, she quickly rearranged the space, setting up 3 small cots in the quiet room with crackers, electrolyte solution, and their favorite books. Eleanor arrived within the hour, summoned by Jasmine's desperate call. "I can't ask you to risk getting sick," Jasmine protested as Eleanor set up camp beside the triplets. "You're not asking, I'm offering," Eleanor replied simply. "Now go prepare. This presentation matters." When the Stellar X team arrived, Jasmine greeted them with professional composure that gave no indication of the morning's chaos. Midway through her technical demonstration, however, a small voice called from the adjoining room. "Mama, need you." Jasmine paused, meeting the executive's eyes directly. "Gentlemen, my children are ill today. I'll need 2 minutes." Without waiting for permission, she stepped into the side room, tended to Nathan's immediate needs, and returned exactly 2 minutes later, continuing her presentation without missing a beat. Rather than appearing unprofessional, the moment showcased her extraordinary efficiency and calm under pressure. "Dr. Williams," said the Stellar X chief engineer after she concluded, "your propulsion system's efficiency metrics are exactly what our next generation of microsatellites requires. The weight reduction alone would transform our deployment capabilities." The CEO nodded in agreement. "We are prepared to offer a development contract for integration testing, with milestone payments and potential production agreements dependent on performance verification." That evening, with the preliminary contract signed and the triplets finally sleeping after their difficult day, Jasmine allowed herself a moment of pure, uncomplicated joy. The Stellar X agreement provided not just financial runway but validation of her approach, both technologically and personally. The following weeks brought transformation. With contract funds secured, Jasmine hired her first employee, a talented engineer named Maya, who arrived for her interview to find Jasmine simultaneously balancing budget projections and breaking up a disagreement between Alexander and William over whose turn it was to use the toy microscope. "Sometimes my sons will be here," Jasmine explained directly. "That's non-negotiable. Is that a problem for you?" Maya glanced at the triplets, now united in examining her toolbox with scientific curiosity. "I grew up in my mother's tailor shop in Mumbai," she replied with a smile. "Children belong where work happens. They learn by seeing." With Maya's arrival, the nascent company began taking structured form. Jasmine filed official incorporation papers, naming her venture Williams Aerospace Technologies, with a logo the triplets had helped design, 3 stars orbiting a central planet. The first real office celebration came 2 months later when successful integration tests with the Stellar X satellite yielded performance exceeding contracted specifications. Eleanor brought champagne and juice boxes, raising a toast to the future, while the triplets clinked their containers enthusiastically. "To Williams Aerospace Technologies," Eleanor proclaimed, "may this be just the beginning." Later that night, after tucking the boys into their beds in the new apartment, still modest but with separate bedrooms for the triplets and reliable heating, Jasmine stepped onto the small balcony. The Cambridge skyline glittered against the autumn darkness, the MIT dome illuminated in the distance. For the first time since those dark days of abandonment, she allowed herself to dream beyond immediate survival. When registering Williams Aerospace Technologies officially, Jasmine didn't know that in just 5 years her small startup would be valued at $500 million, attracting attention from the entire aerospace sector, including a Jackson Reed who grew increasingly concerned about the mysterious competitor emerging on the horizon. The 5th anniversary party of Williams Aerospace Technologies wasn't held in an opulent ballroom or exclusive rooftop venue as might be expected for a company now valued at $500 million. Instead, Jasmine had transformed their expanded headquarters, an entire floor of a Cambridge research park, into a showcase of their journey. Display panels chronicled the evolution from her MIT laboratory prototype to the revolutionary propulsion systems now powering satellites for 3 space agencies. At the center of it all stood a glass case containing the original handwritten equations from her hospital bed, displayed alongside the crude model built during those sleepless nights with newborn triplets. "Mommy, can I explain the magnetic recapture system to the NASA people?" 9-year-old Alexander tugged at Jasmine's sleeve, his dark eyes serious behind wire-framed glasses that made him look like a miniature professor. Jasmine smiled down at him, straightening his bow tie. "They've seen the presentation, sweetheart. Tonight is about celebrating, not technical briefings." "But I added notes about the efficiency variables," he persisted, holding up a tablet displaying complex mathematical formulas that would challenge most doctoral students. Nearby, Nathan was engrossed in conversation with the company's lead software engineer, pointing out potential improvements to their simulation code with the confidence of someone 3 times his age. William, meanwhile, had somehow managed to disassemble a display model and was methodically rebuilding it with modifications he felt would improve performance. At 30 years old, Jasmine Williams had transformed from a desperate, abandoned student into a force reshaping the aerospace industry. Williams Aerospace now had offices in 3 countries, over 200 employees, and contracts with NASA, ESA, and JAXA. The propulsion technology she'd developed while pregnant with triplets had become the industry standard, and she'd diversified into sustainable energy systems and lunar exploration equipment. "Ms. Williams?" A server approached respectfully. "It's 6:30. "Thank you." Jasmine immediately began extracting herself from a conversation with potential investors. "Gentlemen, please enjoy the refreshments. My executive team can answer any further questions." The investors exchanged surprised glances as she walked away. "But we were discussing the Series D funding." "6:30 is family dinner time," Eleanor explained, stepping smoothly into Jasmine's place. "Non-negotiable since the boys were born. You'll find Ms. Williams available again at 8. In a private conference room converted to a dining space, Jasmine found her sons already seated at a table set with proper dishes rather than the paper plates used for the main event. This daily ritual remained sacred despite her growing empire. "Alexander, how was your quantum mechanics tutor today?" Jasmine asked, serving salad onto each plate. "Boring," Alexander sighed dramatically. "He keeps using simplified models. I told him about the Schrödinger equations I was reading, but he said those are for much older students." Nathan snorted. "Same problem with my programming mentor. I showed her my neural network project and she thought someone else must have written it." "People have expectations about what 9-year-olds should know," Jasmine explained gently. "Remember, your experiences are unusual." William, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly looked up from his plate. "Why don't we have a dad like other kids?" The question hung in the air, bringing conversation to an abrupt halt. Jasmine had known this moment would come eventually. She'd prepared for it, yet the timing still caught her off guard. "That's a good question," she answered carefully, setting down her fork. "Some families have 2 parents, some have 1, others have grandparents or guardians." "But most kids have a father," William persisted. "We must have had one at some point. Biology makes that obvious." Alexander and Nathan had stopped eating, their identical faces showing the same intense curiosity. These were not ordinary children who could be distracted with simple answers. Their analytical minds would dissect any evasion. "You did have a biological father," Jasmine acknowledged. "He and I were together before you were born." "Where is he now?" Alexander asked. Jasmine considered her words carefully. He chose not to be part of our family. When I told him I was pregnant with you three, he decided he wasn't ready for that responsibility. Didn't he want to know us? Nathan's voice held a rare note of vulnerability. Some people aren't prepared to be part of something extraordinary, Jasmine replied, reaching out to touch each boy's hand. That reflects on his limitations, not on your value. The triplets absorbed this information with thoughtful expressions. William finally nodded, apparently satisfied with her explanation. The conversation gradually returned to discussions of school projects and scientific discoveries, but Jasmine knew this wouldn't be the last time they questioned their origins. Later that evening, after the party concluded and the boys were in bed, Jasmine sat in her office reviewing quarterly reports. A business magazine lay open on her desk, folded to a small article about Reed Technologies' struggling attempt to pivot from software to hardware development. The accompanying photo showed Jackson Reed at a product launch, his once youthful face now showing signs of stress and premature aging. Jasmine felt no satisfaction at his company's difficulties. Over the years, the acute pain of his betrayal had faded into something more distant, a critical turning point rather than an ongoing wound. She closed the magazine and turned her attention back to the expansion plans for Williams Aerospace's new European Research Center. The following morning brought a visit from NASA administrators to discuss the Lunar Habitat Project, Williams Aerospace's most ambitious undertaking yet. Their propulsion technology had evolved into comprehensive life support and energy systems designed for permanent lunar settlements. "Your integrated approach is revolutionary," commented Dr. Harmon, examining the habitat prototype. "Most contractors specialize in either propulsion or life support. You've created a seamless ecosystem." "Specialization creates vulnerability," Jasmine explained, guiding them through the laboratory. "A lunar habitat can't afford system incompatibilities." As they approached the testing area, the visitors paused at the sight of three identical boys in lab coats, each monitoring different aspects of a simulation. "Oxygen reclamation at 97% efficiency," Alexander reported without looking up. "Power consumption curves stabilizing within projected parameters," added Nathan. William adjusted a setting and nodded with satisfaction. "Thermal regulation compensating correctly for simulated lunar night conditions." Dr. Harmon's eyebrows rose. "Your assistants seem remarkably knowledgeable." "My sons," Jasmine corrected with a smile. "They've been contributing to our projects since they could read. Their perspectives often highlight oversights in our thinking." After the NASA team departed, Jasmine found herself alone in her office, surrounded by the patents and awards that lined the walls. Between formal certifications hung framed drawings from the boys' earlier years, crude rockets and stars gradually evolving into sophisticated technical sketches as their abilities developed. A knock at her door revealed Eleanor, now Williams Aerospace's chief research advisor. "The acquisition team needs your signature on the Singapore facility documents." Jasmine signed the papers, authorizing the purchase of a manufacturing center that would double their production capacity. "I've been thinking about William's question yesterday." "About his father?" Eleanor settled into the chair across from Jasmine's desk. "Yes. They're old enough now to start wondering about specifics. Soon they'll be asking his name, maybe even wanting to meet him." Eleanor studied her protégé carefully. "And how do you feel about that possibility?" "Indifferent, honestly," Jasmine replied. Jackson made his choice very clear. If the boys eventually want to know him, that will be their decision to make. But they'll do so from a position of strength and achievement, not need. Later that week, Jasmine stood before a crowded auditorium at MIT, accepting the Distinguished Innovation Award, the youngest recipient in the institution's history. In the front row sat Alexander, Nathan, and William, their identical faces beaming with pride as their mother described the technological breakthroughs that were transforming space exploration. "Innovation isn't born from comfort," she told the audience. "It emerges when conventional solutions prove inadequate. when you must build what doesn't exist because failure isn't an option. That evening, as their driver navigated through Boston traffic toward their Cambridge home, Nathan looked up from his tablet where he'd been reading financial news. "Mom, did you see this article about Reed Technologies? They're struggling to secure Series B funding after their navigation system failed during the satellite launch last year." Jasmine kept her expression neutral. Many tech companies face challenges as markets evolve. "The CEO's name is Jackson Reed," Nathan continued, scrolling through the article. "Their stock has dropped 63% since the failed launch." "Perhaps they'll adapt," Jasmine replied, turning the conversation to their upcoming trip to the European Space Agency headquarters. At home, after the boys had gone to bed, Jasmine found herself standing before the living room windows overlooking the Boston skyline. In the glass reflection, she barely recognized herself compared to the desperate young woman of 9 years ago. Designer clothes had replaced thrift store finds, confidence had replaced fear, and the constant exhaustion had given way to purposeful energy. Her phone buzzed with an email from the board chair. The diversification into sustainable energy storage systems was proceeding ahead of schedule, with potential contracts from 3 international space agencies. Williams Aerospace was no longer just a propulsion company, but an integrated space technology leader positioned to shape humanity's extraterrestrial future. Jasmine smiled at the news, remembering Jackson's cruel dismissal. "You're a burden to my future." How ironic that her supposedly burdensome path had led to innovations reshaping human exploration of space, while his unencumbered journey had resulted in a struggling company fighting for relevance. As she prepared for bed, Jasmine made her usual stop at the boys' rooms. Alexander slept surrounded by books on theoretical physics. Nathan had fallen asleep with his programming tablet still in hand, and William's bed was littered with component sketches for his latest project. Looking at their peaceful faces, so similar to Jackson's yet filled with a curiosity and compassion he had lacked, Jasmine felt a profound gratitude for the difficult path that had brought them here. While signing the historic contract with NASA that would make Williams Aerospace a global power, Jasmine couldn't foresee that 3 years later she would be face-to-face with Jackson Reed at an event that would forever change the power balance between them. The NASA contract signing ceremony concluded with enthusiastic applause, photographers capturing the historic moment as Jasmine shook hands with the agency's director. 3 years of negotiations had culminated in Williams Aerospace securing the position as primary technology provider for NASA's Permanent Lunar Base initiative. As the crowd dispersed and executives exchanged congratulations, Jasmine's thoughts drifted to her sons, now 12 years old and already making their own marks on the scientific community. The triplets had grown from precocious toddlers into extraordinary young men, their intellectual development accelerating at a pace that astonished even their teachers at Westfield Academy, Boston's most prestigious school for gifted students. Standing at her office window overlooking the Charles River, Jasmine reviewed the latest school reports that had arrived that morning. Each boy had distinguished himself in different yet equally impressive ways. Alexander's mathematical prowess had recently attracted attention from beyond the school. His paper on algorithmic optimization for spacecraft navigation, written as a simple hobby project, had been reviewed by actual NASA engineers who initially believed it was written by a graduate student. When they discovered the author was 12 years old, they invited him to present at their Navigation Systems division. The presentation had been a triumph. Alexander stood before aerospace engineers with complete confidence, explaining his algorithm's novel approach to reducing computational load during critical orbital maneuvers. The video Jasmine had recorded showed her son fielding complex questions with ease, his hands moving expressively as he explained concepts most adults couldn't grasp. Nathan, meanwhile, had channeled his analytical mind toward digital security. What began as curiosity about encryption had evolved into sophisticated programming skills that inadvertently exposed vulnerabilities in his school's network. Rather than punishing him, the headmaster had wisely connected Nathan with cybersecurity professionals who now mentored his talents toward constructive applications. Last month, Nathan had developed a security protocol that identified previously undetected weaknesses in financial transaction systems. When properly demonstrated to banking officials, with Jasmine's careful supervision, his work had earned serious attention. 3 financial institutions were now implementing modifications based on his insights, with appropriate compensation placed in a trust fund for his future. William, always the most physically dynamic of the 3, had combined his boundless energy with mechanical brilliance. In the advanced manufacturing lab Jasmine had helped establish at their school, William had constructed a working prototype that refined his mother's original propulsion system. His adjustments to the ionization chamber, made with intuitive leaps rather than formal calculations, had somehow improved efficiency by an additional 7%. "They're not just smart," Eleanor had observed during her last visit. "They're innovative in ways that can't be taught. They see possibilities others miss." Jasmine's phone chimed with a calendar alert. The boys' science competition at MIT was starting in an hour. She gathered her belongings quickly, instructing her assistant to reschedule her afternoon meetings. Some corporate CEOs might delegate attendance at their children's events, but Jasmine had maintained her rule established years ago. Family milestones took precedence over business, no matter how important the meeting. The MIT auditorium buzzed with excitement as teams of teenage scientists presented their projects to judges and spectators. Most competitors were high school juniors and seniors, making the Westfield Academy team of 12-year-olds a curiosity. Jasmine slipped into a seat near the back, wanting her presence to support but not distract her sons. "The Williams triplets are up next," whispered an audience member nearby. "I heard they built something revolutionary." "Again?" replied his companion. "Last year they won with that water purification system. Hard to believe they're only in 7th grade." The announcer's voice echoed through the sound system. "Next presentation, Quantum Entanglement for Secure Lunar Communications by Alexander, Nathan, and William Williams from Westfield Academy." The triplets took the stage with coordinated precision. Though identical in appearance, same height, same dark wavy hair, same sharp jawline that occasionally gave Jasmine a jolt of recognition, their presentation styles revealed their distinct personalities. Alexander began with theoretical foundations, his explanation clear and methodical. Nathan followed with practical applications, demonstrating their working prototype with controlled enthusiasm. William concluded with future implications, his natural charisma capturing the audience's imagination. The judges' expressions shifted from polite interest to genuine amazement as the presentation progressed. When the question period began, the boys fielded complex queries about quantum mechanics and signal propagation with ease that belied their age. Jasmine noticed several judges discreetly checking their credentials, clearly struggling to reconcile the sophisticated content with the youthful presenters. Their system could revolutionize secure communications for deep space missions, one judge commented to another, unaware that Jasmine could overhear. "This isn't student-level work. It's beyond what most professionals in the field are doing." After the competition, which the triplets won handily, a reporter from Technology Tomorrow approached them in the lobby. Jasmine moved closer, protective instincts activated. She had carefully managed media exposure of her prodigy sons, allowing professional recognition while guarding their personal lives. "I'm writing a feature on young innovators," the reporter explained after introducing herself. "Would you mind answering a few questions about your work?" With Jasmine's nod of approval, the boys agreed. The interview progressed professionally until the reporter's questions shifted direction. "You 3 have accomplished so much already. Who inspires you the most? Your mother is obviously brilliant, but is there a father figure who influenced your interest in science?" A brief silence fell. The triplets exchanged glances, their identical faces reflecting the same uncertainty. It was Alexander who finally answered. "Our mother inspires us. She built Williams Aerospace while raising us. That's all the inspiration we've needed." The reporter persisted. But surely there are male mentors or role models in your lives. William stepped forward slightly. We have excellent teachers and our mother's colleagues. We don't lack for guidance. Sensing the boy's discomfort, Jasmine intervened smoothly. My sons have grown up surrounded by brilliant minds of all genders. If you'd like to discuss their technical achievements, we're happy to continue, but their personal lives remain private. That evening, during their traditional family dinner at home, the atmosphere remained thoughtful. Jasmine had prepared their favorite meal to celebrate the competition victory, but conversation lacked its usual animated quality. That reporter had no right to ask about personal matters, Nathan finally said, breaking the silence. People are curious about successful families, Jasmine replied carefully, especially when those families don't fit conventional patterns. Alexander set down his fork. We know we must have a biological father. It's simple genetics, but you've never mentioned him specifically. Jasmine had anticipated this conversation for years, preparing mentally for when curiosity would eventually overcome the boy's natural reluctance to broach the subject. At 13, they were entering an age where identity questions naturally intensified. You're right, she acknowledged, and you're old enough now for the complete truth. She rose from the table and retrieved a small box from her study. Inside were photographs and documents she had preserved, not from sentimentality, but from a belief that her sons deserved honest answers when they were ready. His name is Jackson Reed, she began, showing them a photograph from her Harvard days. We met when I was an undergraduate and interned at his family's company, Reed Technologies. We dated for 2 years. The boys studied the photograph intently, noting their unmistakable resemblance to the smiling young man with his arm around a younger version of their mother. When I discovered I was pregnant with triplets, I told him, expecting we would face the challenge together. Jasmine kept her voice measured, factual. Instead, he told me I would be a burden to his future. He abandoned us that night, saying he would never support children who would only give him expenses and no return. The stark truth hung in the air. William's face flushed with anger, Alexander's expression turned analytical, and Nathan's eyes reflected hurt quickly masked by careful neutrality. He said those exact words? Alexander asked quietly. Yes, Jasmine confirmed. He threw his promise ring at my feet on the sidewalk and drove away. I never heard from him again. William stood abruptly, pacing the dining room. Why would anyone reject their own children? Reject you? That makes no logical sense. Some people calculate value only in immediate terms, Jasmine explained. He saw a pregnant girlfriend and 3 babies as liabilities, not potential. Has he ever tried to contact us? Nathan's question came hesitantly. Now that you're successful, has he changed his mind? No, Jasmine answered truthfully. To my knowledge, he's never attempted to reach out. Reed Technologies still exists, though it's struggling in recent years. He appears occasionally in business publications. Alexander processed this information with characteristic thoroughness. Why are you telling us now? Because you deserve to know your complete history, Jasmine replied, and because questions about your father shouldn't come from strangers or reporters, but from me, with honesty and context. The conversation continued late into the evening, the boys asking pragmatic questions about genetics, legal status, and how Jasmine had managed during those early years. She answered everything truthfully, neither demonizing Jackson nor excusing his choices. When the triplets finally retired to their rooms, Jasmine found Nathan still awake an hour later, his computer screen glowing as his fingers flew across the keyboard. Research? She asked from his doorway. Nathan started slightly, then nodded. I was looking him up. Reed Technologies. Their stock is down 70% from 5 years ago. Their last major product failed during launch testing. Jasmine sat on the edge of his bed. I know you were curious. That's natural. I wanted to understand who chose not to know us, Nathan admitted. Now I think I understand the value of your choice to stay. The following weekend, as the boys worked in the home laboratory Jasmine had built for their projects, she noticed a new determination in their approach. The hurt and confusion had transformed into focused energy, their natural brilliance sharpening with emotional purpose. "Mom," Alexander called as she passed the lab, "we've refined the navigation algorithm. NASA's implementing it in the next Mars mission planning sequence. And my security protocol has been approved for banking infrastructure," Nathan added without looking up from his screen. William gestured to his latest prototype. "I've improved the energy efficiency by another 4%. The manufacturing division wants to test it next week." Watching her son's work, these extraordinary young men who carried her determination and resilience alongside their father's features, Jasmine felt a profound satisfaction. Not vindication against Jackson, but confirmation that her faith in their shared potential had been justified. That night, as they reviewed plans for Williams Aerospace's expansion into the Asian market, William asked unexpectedly, "Do you ever regret that he's not part of our lives?" "No," Jasmine answered honestly. "I regret that he missed knowing 3 remarkable human beings, but we built something complete together. The 4 of us. Something extraordinary." "Like you told us," Alexander nodded. "Some people aren't prepared to be part of something extraordinary." Naquela noite, após finalmente compartilhar a verdade sobre Jackson Reed com seus filhos, Jasmine não imaginava que em apenas 2 anos estaria fechando a aquisição da empresa lunar que colocaria a Williams Aerospace no mesmo evento de gala onde Jackson planejava desesperadamente salvar sua empresa em declínio. The evening after sharing the truth about Jackson with her sons, Jasmine found herself unable to sleep. Seeing their faces process the reality of their father's rejection had reopened wounds she thought long healed. Now, 2 years later, those wounds had transformed into something else entirely. Determination crystallized into empire. Jasmine Williams stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office on the 38th floor of the Williams Aerospace headquarters in Manhattan. At 38, she commanded a business valued at $4.2 billion, a meteoric rise that financial analysts struggled to explain with conventional metrics. The New York skyline sprawled before her, a concrete constellation mirroring the actual stars her technology now helped humanity reach. "The final documents for the Lunar Expedition's acquisition are ready for your signature, Ms. Williams," her executive assistant announced, placing an elegant leather portfolio on the glass desk. "Thank you, James." Jasmine's voice carried the quiet authority that had become her trademark. No raised voice was necessary when your words shaped the future of space exploration. As she reviewed the acquisition documents, Jasmine allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Lunar expeditions represented the missing piece in Williams Aerospace's expansion strategy. Their landing systems and habitat technologies complemented her propulsion and life support innovations perfectly. The merger would consolidate her company's position as the undisputed leader in private space exploration. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. Her legal counsel, Diane Matsuo, entered with another set of documents in a plain blue folder. "The other matter you requested," Diane said, her voice lowered despite the soundproofed office. "The acquisition team has secured commitments from 78% of Reed Technologies shareholders. They'll accept our offer during tomorrow's trading window." Jasmine accepted the folder, her expression betraying nothing. "And the structure ensures anonymity until the transaction is complete?" "Complete confidentiality. The holding company shows no connection to Williams Aerospace. Jackson Reed won't know you're behind the acquisition until you choose to reveal it." Jasmine nodded, running her fingers over the embossed Reed Technologies logo on the document. The company had declined precipitously since she'd last seen its founder. Failed product launches, strategic missteps, and Jackson's increasingly erratic leadership had driven its stock price down 80% over 7 years. What had once been a promising software empire was now a struggling mid-tier technology company desperately seeking a lifeline. "He doesn't know," Jasmine mused, more to herself than to Diane. "After all these years tracking our technologies, competing for contracts, He still hasn't made the connection. Some people see only what they expect to see, Diane replied diplomatically. A woman rising from nothing to build an aerospace empire doesn't fit his worldview. Later that afternoon, Jasmine's intercom buzzed. "Your sons have arrived, Ms. Williams." The office door opened to reveal Alexander, Nathan, and William, now 15 years old and already tall enough to look her in the eye. In their tailored Armani suits, with identical sharp jawlines and intelligent dark eyes, they were living embodiments of what Jackson Reed had discarded. Brilliant, driven young men poised to inherit an empire. "The presentation for tonight is ready, Mother," Alexander announced, his tablet displaying detailed slides about Williams Aerospace's lunar colonization initiatives. "I've run final diagnostics on the holographic demonstration," Nathan added. "The projection mapping will adjust automatically to the Metropolitan Museum's architecture." William, always the most intuitive of the three, studied his mother's expression. "You seem preoccupied. Is everything proceeding according to plan?" Jasmine smiled at her son's perceptiveness. At 15, they were already fully integrated into the company's operations, each developing specialized knowledge that complemented their brothers. Alexander excelled at theoretical mathematics and mission planning, Nathan at systems integration and security protocols, and William at engineering innovations that consistently pushed technological boundaries. "Everything is proceeding exactly as planned," Jasmine assured them. "Both acquisitions will be finalized by tomorrow morning." Nathan's eyes widened slightly. "Both? I thought only lunar expeditions was scheduled for this quarter." "A secondary opportunity presented itself," Jasmine explained carefully. "Reed Technologies has accepted our holding company's offer." The triplets exchanged significant glances, a silent communication system they'd perfected over years. It was Alexander who voiced their collective thought. "Reed Technologies, as in Jackson Reed?" "The same." Jasmine kept her tone neutral, matter of fact. "Their shareholders will approve the sale tomorrow morning, approximately 20 minutes before I announce the Lunar Expeditions acquisition at the Tech Future Gala." William's expression darkened momentarily. "Does he know you're behind the acquisition?" "Not yet. His board kept negotiations confidential, believing they were dealing with a Singapore investment firm." Jasmine turned back to the window, her silhouette sharp against the Manhattan skyline. "Corporate acquisitions happen daily in this industry. This one simply makes strategic sense for our software division." The boys recognized the subtle shift in their mother's demeanor, the barely perceptible straightening of her shoulders, the fractional lift of her chin. These were the only outward signs of the iron will that had built Williams Aerospace from nothing while raising 3 children alone. "Well then," Nathan said with a small smile, "tonight's event just became considerably more interesting." 2 hours later, Jasmine's Rolls-Royce Phantom glided through Manhattan traffic toward the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Inside, the Williams family reviewed final details for the evening's presentation. The Tech Future Gala represented the most prestigious gathering in the technology and aerospace industries, with executives, investors, and innovators from around the world in attendance. "We'll announce the Lunar Expeditions acquisition at 8:15, Jasmine confirmed, checking the diamond-encrusted Rolex on her wrist, a gift to herself on Williams Aerospace's first billion-dollar valuation. The holographic demonstration of the lunar base will follow. "And the Reed Technologies announcement?" Alexander inquired, his tablet displaying real-time updates of the preliminary shareholder agreements already being signed. "That remains unscheduled," Jasmine replied. "Let's see how the evening unfolds." As the car approached the museum, Jasmine received a message on her secure phone. She read it twice, then allowed herself a brief, satisfied smile. "The Reed Technologies board has unanimously pre-approved the acquisition offer. The final vote is merely a formality." The Metropolitan Museum of Art had been transformed for the evening, its classical architecture now augmented with subtle technological displays highlighting innovations from participating companies. As the Williams family ascended the grand staircase, photographers captured their arrival, The poised, confident CEO in her tailored Armani suit and her three identical sons, already featured in scientific and business publications as the Princes of Williams Aerospace. Inside, the gala hummed with power and influence. Tech billionaires mingled with NASA administrators while venture capitalists scanned the crowd for the next revolutionary startup. Jasmine moved through this rarefied atmosphere with practiced ease, her sons following in perfect formation, accepting greetings and engaging in sophisticated conversations about space colonization initiatives. Ms. Williams, your lunar habitat presentation is scheduled in 30 minutes, an event coordinator informed her. The central hall has been prepared for your holographic demonstration. Thank you. My team will handle the technical setup. Jasmine gestured to Nathan, who nodded and departed with two engineers to verify the projection systems. From the mezzanine level overlooking the main hall, Jackson Reed observed the gathering with growing desperation. At 42, his once youthful features showed the strain of failing to maintain his family's company. His tailored suit, still expensive but from last season's collection, hung slightly loose on his frame, evidence of weight lost to stress rather than exercise. "That's Jasmine Williams," whispered a venture capitalist standing nearby. "Her company's revolutionizing space exploration. Word is she's announcing something big tonight." "Williams Aerospace," his companion replied with reverence. "Started from nothing 10 years ago, now worth over $4 billion. And those are her sons, prodigies, all three of them. The youngest one developed a propulsion improvement that NASA immediately adopted." Jackson half listened to their conversation, his attention focused on potential investors who might save Reed Technologies from its downward spiral. The Singapore firm's acquisition offer represented his last hope for a dignified exit from the company his father had built. Tomorrow's shareholder vote would determine whether he walked away with a respectable payout or watched his family legacy disintegrate completely. His attention was drawn to a commotion near the main entrance. A striking woman in her late 30s had entered, accompanied by three identical teenage boys. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar, though he couldn't place where he might have seen her before. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the event's MC, his voice echoing through the museum's grand hall, "please gather for our keynote presentation. It is my distinct honor to introduce the visionary behind the revolution in private space exploration, CEO of Williams Aerospace Technologies, Dr. Jasmine Williams." Jackson froze as the woman moved confidently toward the stage. The name registered first, then her face, older, more refined, but unmistakably the same woman he had abandoned 15 years ago. As she took her position at the center of the stage, the three teenage boys arranged themselves at strategic points around the hall, tablets in hand, coordinating the technical aspects of the presentation. It couldn't be possible. The struggling student he had left behind was now the Jasmine Williams, the technological pioneer whose company had outbid Reed Technologies for NASA contracts 3 years running. "Tonight," Jasmine began, her voice commanding immediate attention, "Williams Aerospace Technologies is proud to announce our acquisition of lunar expeditions, completing our vertical integration strategy for humanity's permanent return to the lunar surface." The hall erupted in gasps and applause as holographic projections materialized throughout the space, detailed three-dimensional renderings of lunar habitats, transport systems, and life support technologies. The display was breathtaking in its sophistication, showing how Williams Aerospace would establish the first permanent human settlement beyond Earth. Jackson stared, transfixed not by the technology, but by the three teenage boys controlling it. Their features were hauntingly familiar. His own eyes, jawline, and bearing reflected 3 times over. The triplets Jasmine had been carrying when he walked away, now 15 years old and clearly integral to her company's operations. "These are my sons," Jasmine's voice continued, pride evident as she gestured to the young men. "Alexander, Nathan, and William Williams, whose innovations in mathematics, software, and engineering have contributed significantly to our lunar initiative." The revelation hit Jackson like a physical blow. The children he had dismissed as burdens were now young geniuses helping shape humanity's future in space. The woman he had abandoned as not good enough for his world was now its undisputed technological leader. As the presentation concluded to thunderous applause, Jackson found himself moving automatically toward the reception area, drawn by a compulsion he couldn't name. He needed to see her up close to confirm that this powerful, poised woman was indeed the same frightened student he had left on that rainy Boston sidewalk. While approaching the center of the hall, he grabbed a champagne flute from a passing server, his hand trembling slightly. He positioned himself along the path Jasmine would likely take toward the VIP reception area. When she passed, surrounded by admirers and investors, he spoke her name, just once, softly, but enough to make her pause. Jasmine. While walking confidently toward the Metropolitan Museum's VIP area, the saltos of Jasmine Williams echoed through the marble hallways of the grand building, her 3 sons following closely behind in their perfectly tailored suits, none of them noticing the pale-faced man watching from the mezzanine, whose empire was about to crumble under her indifferent gaze. Jasmine. The single word hung in the air between them. Jasmine Williams turned, her movement deliberate and controlled, to face the voice from her past. She had anticipated this moment for 15 years, imagining various scenarios of shock, anger, or vindication. Yet when it arrived, she felt only a strange detachment, as if observing a scene from someone else's life. Jackson Reed stood before her, holding a champagne flute with visibly trembling fingers. Time had not been kind to him. His once confident posture now seemed strained. His designer suit, which her trained eye recognized as last season's collection, hung slightly loose on his frame. Fine lines creased the corners of his eyes, etched by stress rather than laughter. Jasmine's gaze was cool and appraising, devoid of either hostility or warmth. Jackson Reed, she acknowledged, her tone perfectly modulated as if addressing a casual business acquaintance at a networking event. I wasn't aware Reed Technologies still existed. The calculated precision of her words struck their target. Jackson's expression flickered between disbelief and humiliation before settling into a forced smile. 15 years is a long time, he managed. You've changed. Success tends to have that effect, Jasmine replied evenly. She made no move to introduce him to the gathering executives nearby or to extend the conversation beyond the minimum courtesy required. The stark contrast between them was evident to everyone within view. Jasmine stood in her impeccably tailored Armani suit, a custom design in midnight blue that complemented her confident posture. The diamond earrings catching the light with each slight movement of her head cost more than Jackson's car. His eyes tracked to her wrist where the limited edition Rolex gleamed, a timepiece he recognized from luxury magazines, knowing its 7-figure price tag. Before Jackson could formulate a response, 3 identical young men approached, their purposeful strides mirroring their mother's confidence. "Mother, Dr. Hawkins from the European Space Agency would like to discuss our terraformation proposal," said the first, his articulation precise and confident. Jackson's breath caught in his throat. Standing before him were 3 teenagers whose features reflected his own with startling clarity. The same eyes, the same jawline, the same bearing. Yet their poised demeanor and intelligent gazes belonged entirely to their mother. Jasmine turned to the triplets, her expression softening marginally. "Alexander, Nathan, William, this is Jackson Reed, a known acquaintance from Boston," she introduced with careful neutrality. "Jackson, these are my sons." Each boy extended a hand in turn, offering perfectly professional handshakes that would have impressed corporate executives twice their age. Their grips were firm, their eye contact direct and evaluating. Jackson felt his stomach clench as he met the identical gazes of 3 sons he had never known, 3 extraordinary young men who carried his features but clearly embodied their mother's brilliance and determination. "Reed Technologies?" Nathan inquired with academic interest, his head tilting slightly. You developed that navigation system that failed during the satellite launch last year, correct? The innocent question, delivered without malice but with devastating accuracy, left Jackson momentarily speechless. Before he could compose a response, a silver-haired investor approached, saving him from the immediate embarrassment of answering. "Dr. Williams, your acquisition of lunar expeditions was brilliant." The woman beamed, touching Jasmine's arm familiarly. "My analysts predict your stock will rise another 30% by quarter's end." "Actually," Jasmine smiled, checking her diamond-encrusted watch with casual elegance, "I've just received confirmation of an even more significant acquisition." Jackson felt a cold dread settle in his stomach as Jasmine's gaze fixed on him with calculated precision. "If you'll excuse me, I have an announcement to make," she said, already turning toward the central stage where the event coordinator was preparing the microphone. The crowd parted naturally for Jasmine as she approached the podium, her sons flanking her with synchronized movements that spoke of years of coordinated public appearances. The museum's ambient lighting dimmed slightly, drawing all attention to the central platform. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jasmine's confident voice carried throughout the hall without effort, "Williams Aerospace Technologies is pleased to announce the complete acquisition of Reed Technologies, finalized exactly 10 minutes ago on NASDAQ." A murmur of surprise rippled through the assembled guests. Jackson felt the floor seem to shift beneath his feet, his vision narrowing to the woman on the stage, the woman he had once dismissed as a burden to his future. "This strategic acquisition will allow us to integrate their development team into our support division while planning a complete restructuring of the brand," she continued, looking directly at Jackson as she delivered the final blow to his family legacy. Applause erupted around him while Jackson stood frozen, the champagne in his glass untouched. The Singapore investment firm, the confidential negotiations, the board's unanimous approval, it had all been Jasmine. She had orchestrated his company's acquisition from behind a veil of corporate entities, waiting until this perfect moment to reveal herself. As the crowd surged forward to congratulate her, Jackson pushed his way toward the stage, his face pale with shock and humiliation. "You can't do this," he hissed when he reached her at the bottom of the steps. "That company is my family's legacy." Jasmine regarded him with the cool detachment of someone observing a mild curiosity. "Business is business, Jackson," she replied calmly. "Your shareholders accepted my offer unanimously this morning. Apparently, your leadership didn't inspire much confidence." The echo of his own callous words from 15 years ago, "You're a burden to my future," seemed to hang in the air between them. Now their positions were reversed in the most dramatic way possible. The woman he had discarded as worthless had systematically dismantled his family empire with the stroke of a pen. "Was this your plan all along?" he demanded, struggling to keep his voice low despite his rising panic. "Some elaborate revenge scheme?" Jasmine's expression remained unchanged, professional and distant. "Revenge requires emotional investment, Jackson. This was simply a sound business decision. Reed Technologies has valuable patents that complement our software division despite its leadership challenges." The triplets appeared at their mother's side, a unified front of identical faces regarding Jackson with curious detachment. He saw nothing of himself in their expressions. No recognition, no connection, only the analytical assessment of strangers evaluating an unexpected variable. "The press is requesting a statement about the acquisition," Alexander informed his mother, pointedly ignoring Jackson. "Of course," Jasmine nodded. "Schedule a brief press conference in the East Gallery in 15 minutes. William, the most observant of the three, studied Jackson with scientific curiosity. "Are you unwell, Mr. Reed? You appear to be experiencing physical distress." The clinical concern in the boy's voice, so like his own yet utterly foreign, struck Jackson more deeply than any insult could have. These were his sons, his biological legacy, yet they regarded him with the impersonal interest one might show a stranger exhibiting concerning symptoms. "I'm fine," Jackson managed, straightening his posture with effort. "I just wasn't expecting this development." Acquisition negotiations typically involve substantial due diligence, Nathan commented. Your board must have determined our mother's offer represented optimal shareholder value given Reed Technologies' declining market position. Jackson stared at the teenager, stunned by the sophisticated business assessment delivered in such a matter-of-fact tone. These were not ordinary 15-year-olds. The boys Jasmine had raised alone were clearly extraordinary in ways he could barely comprehend. "We should proceed to the press area," Alexander suggested, checking his own watch, a matching Rolex that Jackson recognized as the limited youth edition, itself worth more than most executives' timepieces. Jasmine nodded in agreement. "Gentlemen, please coordinate with the PR team. I'll join you momentarily." The triplets moved away with synchronized efficiency, leaving Jasmine and Jackson momentarily isolated in the crowded hall. "They're remarkable," Jackson said quietly, a complex mixture of emotions coloring his voice. "They look just like—" "They are remarkable," Jasmine interrupted, her tone flat. "And they've never needed anything from you." "I was young and stupid," he began, the desperation of a drowning man in his voice. "I didn't understand what I was throwing away." "You were 25, Jackson, not some confused teenager," Jasmine replied, her composure unshakable. "You made your choice with full understanding of the consequences. You called my children burdens who would give you expenses and no return. How ironic that they've helped build a company that just acquired yours." Before Jackson could respond, a senior Williams Aerospace executive approached. "Dr. Williams, the NASA administrator is requesting a private word about the lunar mission timeline." "Of course." Jasmine nodded to the executive before turning back to Jackson one last time. "If you'll excuse me, I have an aerospace empire to run. Your transition team will contact you tomorrow regarding your role, or lack thereof, in the restructured organization." As she walked away, her confident stride carrying her toward the future she had built through sheer determination, Jackson remained rooted in place, watching the woman he had once discarded command the attention and respect of the entire room. The three young men who shared his DNA but owed nothing to his influence moved through the crowd with their mother's same assured presence, already shaping a world he could barely comprehend. Looking down at his now empty company badge, Jackson Reed finally understood the magnitude of what he had thrown away that rainy night in Boston. Not just a family, but a future that now belonged exclusively to the woman he had once called a burden, and the extraordinary sons who carried his features but embodied their mother's indomitable spirit. While the platea applauded, Jackson approached the stage, his face pale, contrasting with the red of humiliation. "You cannot do this," he whispered furiously when she descended. "That company is my family legacy." "Business is business, Jackson," she responded calmly. "Your shareholders accepted my offer unanimously this morning. Apparently, your leadership didn't inspire much confidence." The Wall Street Journal's headline glared from Jackson Reed's coffee table with brutal clarity: "The Fall of the Reed Empire." His apartment in Upper East Side, once a showcase of success with its designer furniture and strategic views of Manhattan, now felt like a mausoleum for his shattered reputation. 3 days had passed since the Metropolitan Museum Gala. 3 days of relentless coverage dismantling not just his business legacy, but his personal character. "Former Harvard intern acquires company of man who abandoned her pregnant with triplets," screamed the New York Post. The Forbes profile was more devastating in its measured tone. From abandoned student to space magnate, how Jasmine Williams built a $4.2 billion empire while raising 3 prodigies alone. Jackson's phone rang for perhaps the 30th time that hour. He glanced at the screen, his now former CFO, and let it go to voicemail like all the others. The cascade of calls had begun moments after Jasmine's announcement and hadn't ceased. Furious shareholders, opportunistic journalists, and finally, last night, his fiancée Charlotte, heiress to the Westbrook banking fortune. "I can't be associated with this narrative, Jackson," she had said, her voice clinically detached over the speakerphone. "The board feels your reputational damage would reflect poorly on the Westbrook name." His engagement, like his company, had been terminated with business-like efficiency. Pulling himself from the leather sofa that had cost more than most people's monthly rent, Jackson moved to the window. The city continued its relentless rhythm below, indifferent to his personal collapse. Somewhere in that skyline, Jasmine Williams was likely signing the final restructuring documents for what had been his family's legacy. 3 days of obsessive research had revealed what he should have recognized years ago. Williams Aerospace Technologies had been competing against Reed Technologies for contracts since its inception, consistently outmaneuvering them with superior innovation and execution. The woman he had dismissed as not good enough for the real world had systematically outperformed him in every measurable metric, all while raising 3 exceptional sons he had rejected before their birth. Jackson's reflection stared back at him from the window glass. Designer stubble now simply unkempt, dark circles beneath eyes that had barely closed since the gala. With sudden determination, he showered, shaved, and dressed in his best remaining suit. If his life was disintegrating, he would at least face it standing. 2 hours later, his driver delivered him to the gleaming skyscraper housing Williams Aerospace's Manhattan headquarters. The building itself seemed to mock him. 70 stories of architectural innovation with the distinctive Williams logo illuminating the skyline he had once hoped to dominate. "I need to see Jasmine Williams," he informed the security desk with what remained of his executive authority. The receptionist regarded him with professional neutrality. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" "Tell her Jackson Reed is here." 20 minutes later, after security verification and a silent elevator ride to the executive floor, Jackson found himself seated not in Jasmine's office but in a secondary conference room. The deliberate slight wasn't lost on him. Visitors of consequence would be received in the CEO's private domain. After precisely 45 minutes, another calculated message, the door opened to admit Jasmine, flanked by 2 sharp-suited attorneys. Her expression revealed nothing as she took the seat across from him. "I have exactly 10 minutes, Jackson," she stated, checking her watch. A different one today, he noticed, even more exclusive than the piece she'd worn at the gala. Jackson leaned forward, years of boardroom confidence deserting him in her presence. "I want to know my sons," he declared without preamble. "I have legal rights." A flicker of something, perhaps surprise at his directness, crossed Jasmine's face before her composed mask returned. "Interesting how you mention rights now, after 15 years, she observed. "Your legal rights prescribed when you abandoned them before birth. Besides, you never registered your name on their birth certificates nor contributed a cent toward their upbringing." "I was young and stupid," Jackson argued, hearing the weakness in his own justification. "I didn't know what I was doing." "You were 25, Jackson, not 15, Jasmine countered, her voice remaining measured. "You were the heir to a technology company, not an irresponsible teenager." She consulted her watch again. "Anything else?" Desperation colored his next words. "I want to be part of their lives. I can offer connections, opportunities." "Connections?" Jasmine's laugh was genuine, the first real emotion she'd displayed. "My sons had lunch with Elon Musk last month to discuss their theories on Martian colonization. William was invited to MIT at 14. Alexander develops algorithms that NASA utilizes. And Nathan recently patented a quantum communication system. What opportunities could you possibly offer that they haven't already created through their own merit?" Each achievement struck Jackson like physical blows, revelations of the extraordinary potential he had casually discarded that night in Boston. "I have money," he attempted, grasping at his last remaining asset. "I can compensate for all these years." Jasmine leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but cutting. "My sons have trust funds of $50 million each. Your total net worth before the acquisition was $38 million. Mathematically, you cannot compensate for anything." The words hit Jackson with devastating precision. He had never imagined she would not only match but vastly exceed his financial success. "What about the boys?" he asked, switching tactics. Shouldn't they choose whether they want to know me? They already know about you, Jasmine replied, surprising him. I told them the truth when they turned 13. I showed them photos, explained the circumstances. Do you know what William asked? Why would anyone reject the chance to be part of our family? They processed the information and moved forward. There's no curiosity, Jackson. No void waiting to be filled. Before he could respond, the conference room door opened without a knock. The triplets entered, then paused in unified surprise at seeing Jackson there. Sorry, Mom. We didn't know you were in a meeting, Alexander said, his voice carrying the confident tone of someone accustomed to being heard in executive settings. No problem. We were actually just finishing, Jasmine replied, her expression softening noticeably as she addressed her sons. The three teenagers regarded Jackson with polite disinterest, their identical faces showing no recognition of any deeper connection. Mr. Reed, I hope the transition of your team to our subsidiary is proceeding without issues, Nathan commented with professional courtesy. My sons, Jackson was just leaving, Jasmine said gently. William, who had remained slightly behind his brothers, studied Jackson's face with analytical precision. You're him, aren't you? The man from Boston. Jackson felt a momentary surge of hope, recognition, acknowledgement, perhaps even the beginning of connection. That hope was immediately extinguished by William's next words. Thank you, the young man said with surprising sincerity. Your absence made our mother build something extraordinary, and taught us that a person's worth doesn't depend on others' judgment. The simple statement, delivered without anger or accusation, devastated Jackson more thoroughly than any recrimination could have. The gentle appreciation for his abandonment, framed as a valuable life lesson, revealed the complete emotional self-sufficiency of these young men. They needed nothing from him, not even closure. With synchronized movements that spoke of years of coordinated existence, the triplets withdrew to the adjacent office, leaving Jackson alone with Jasmine and the oppressive weight of missed opportunities. You see, Jackson, Jasmine said, rising to signal the meeting's conclusion, there's no space for you in our lives, not from anger or revenge, but simply because we've filled all the gaps with achievements and happiness. What you threw away that night in Boston doesn't exist anymore to be reclaimed. Her words carried no triumph, only a statement of fact delivered with the same dispassionate clarity she might use to explain a business prospectus. This, perhaps, was the most crushing revelation. She had moved so far beyond their shared history that it barely registered as significant in her consciousness. As security escorted him through the gleaming lobby, Jackson paused before the enormous display dominating the atrium, a prototype of the Williams Aerospace lunar habitat, the centerpiece of their revolutionary space colonization program. Around it, display screens showed images of technological breakthroughs, international partnerships, and the company's leadership team. A maintenance crew was carefully installing an enormous banner across the building's facade. Jackson stepped outside to watch as the fabric unfurled, revealing the new corporate logo featuring 4 silhouettes, Jasmine and the 3 young men, with the tagline, "The future is the heritage of those who build it." The irony crushed whatever remaining self-assurance he possessed. He had abandoned a pregnant student believing she would burden his ascent, only to watch her rise to heights he could never have achieved, creating a legacy that would endure for generations. As his taxi pulled away from the Williams Aerospace headquarters, merging into the relentless flow of Fifth Avenue traffic, Jackson Reed finally understood the magnitude of his loss. Not just a family, but an empire, a legacy, and above all, the chance to be part of something truly extraordinary. Jasmine's indifference wasn't calculated revenge, but the natural consequence of a fulfilled life that had no reason to mourn what never existed. Atop the skyscraper, Jasmine gathered with her sons to review plans for the first permanent lunar base by Williams Aerospace. Their next chapter of achievements she would continue to write without looking back, while Manhattan's lights witnessed the complete fulfillment of the promise made on that cold night in Boston so long ago. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen